All right, well, I think it's time to get started, so hopefully everybody can hear me all right. My name is Josh Bohanek, and I am with the Davie Resource Group, and this is our third quarter webinar in our webinar series, and we're going to be doing this one on urban forestry master plans, so hopefully that's what you're here to learn about, and I'm excited to get this going. So if you guys have any questions or any thoughts or comments, or you want to share any info information, please go ahead and utilize the features in the software there to post any questions. And I think you could share links and whatnot to other resources you might have. So hopefully you can hear me all right and should be able to see the screen all right. And at the very end of this, I do have a CEU credit, and I'll be putting that number up there, and you can submit that for some ISA credits. So any good presentation on master plans should start with an agenda and start with a plan purpose, right? So here's what we're going to be doing today. I'm just going to quickly kind of define what a master plan is, just to make sure we're all on the same page, and then go through the process of why you might want to create an urban forestry master plan, and and then finish off with probably what most everybody's interested in is what are the components of a master plan. So we'll dive right into it and get going. You know, an urban forestry master plan, I think this is probably one of the most best definitions I've seen out there. But what I like to think about it is really it is a roadmap, and it really helps to give you recommendations and to make everybody be on the same page for effectively and proactively managing your urban forest and your community forest there. But most importantly, it does provide that shared vision, not only amongst the general public, but as well as interdepartments, nonprofits, other allied professionals, or industries within a community. To further define it in greater detail, I like to point out what it's not and what it is. And most commonly, I think just the semantics of it is a little bit of a confusion between a master plan and a management plan. Sometimes people will call it a management plan, which is fine. But for the purpose of our discussion today, this is what I like to think about as some of the key differences and elements of a master plan. To start off with, management plans, in my opinion, or in my experience, are usually more dealing with the public components of a community, and a master plan dives into the public and the private, looking at all of the trees and the resource. A lot of times management plans are really only going to affect or be implemented by city staff or those that are working for the community or the agency. Versus a master plan, which will involve multiple stakeholders, which will involve private citizens, which will involve nonprofits, volunteers, city staff, maybe including all the staff in certain departments or across departments. Usually a management plan goal is more about getting proactive on maintenance. It's usually catching up on a backlog of work or operational efficiencies. Whereas a master plan is more about the shared vision or making common alignment around goals and purposes, and less on the operational components of it. Traditionally, management plans are pretty easy to put together. It's usually just one or two people working in a defined objective of figuring out a problem and solving it. So therefore, usually it only takes a couple of weeks. The master plan usually takes a lot longer. It could be anywhere from several months to a year or plus. And we'll get into the components of the plan, and that'll help share why that is. But just for a quicker synopsis here, it does take quite a bit longer by developing a master plan. And with that becomes the idea of implementation. You know, traditionally a management plan is a little more short-term focused. You have a defined period. We want to try to catch up our work, or we want to improve our operation, or we want to accomplish these goals in this amount of time frame. Versus a master plan is, you know, more forward-thinking, long-term vision, is kind of out there. It's going to ebb and flow as priorities or opportunities appear. And finally, costs. You know, because of the amount of time and the amount of work that go into each one of these, if you were to contract out, or if you are to, you know, do something in-house, the amount of effort you could expect to expend, you know, management plan is on that $3,000 to $10,000 range, depending on how much of a cookie cutter template you want to have versus how much custom in-depth components you might have. Versus a master plan, where it gets quite a bit more intense, and the costs on these are usually more to do with the level of stakeholder engagement, the level of data collection or analysis that you want performed, how many holes you want plugged, if you will, in the master plan process. So with that, so that's the difference between a management plan and a master plan. Just again, so we're all on the same page here. So now we're going to go into why would you create an urban forestry master plan? And specifically, I want to talk about, you know, the drivers behind it, or a reason behind it, as well as some of the processes that communities have gone through. And then we'll wrap up the why with kind of the how, and that's the approach that you can take to it. You know, when you're doing a master plan, one of the things I always like to point out is that there really isn't a template to follow. It should be a truly customized individual experience. And therefore, you know, it's really important to start at the beginning and kind of think of what you're envisioning. Of course, you know, with Google and with you know, technology and our shared experiences, we're always, you know, researching and finding and building off of the last one that was done. And that's always our goal whenever we're doing a master plan, is to take the experiences we have and to you know, build on them and implement them. But before we do that, I would like to do a quick poll here, and just so I can get a better picture of where you know, where everybody is coming from and what your goals are. So give me 1 second here while I launch this. While you're doing that, I'm going to pull through here and see if I can't find some questions that are coming up. I hear that some people are having some problem with some audio. If you maybe just check your settings, I think it should be coming through fine. And I will provide the slides at the end for everybody. I'll put them up on SlideShare and send out a link. So, all right, let's go ahead and close this poll. And it looks like about 2/3 of the people here are from counties and cities and public agencies. So that's good. And the rest are mainly making up nonprofits. All right. So thank you very much. I do have a couple more polls to try to keep you alive and awake as well. So no matter what you call a master plan, it's important to understand that really what it is it's a framework or a roadmap or that shared vision of where it is. And it's not something that you're going to guide day-to-day decisions. It's not something that's an operational component, if you will. But it is something that's going to help along the way. So you can't just blindly follow it. It's something that you're going to have to, dust off, pick up, and help guide those bigger decisions when you're working through it. And it's important to understand, why do you need, or why are you wanting this master plan? I don't think anybody wants to go through a master planning process, because it can be pretty in-depth and pretty, it's a two-way street. You can't just contract it out. You have to have some skin in the game and work through it. So it's important to understand, what are you trying to accomplish with this? You're trying to get people aligned. Are you trying to solve a simple problem? Is it because of an issue that's happening, or something that you're foreseeing, whether it's budgets or a decline in tree canopy, or impending emerald ash borer, or some sort of invasive pest, something like that. So kind of think about what your goals are, so that you can have that vision and try to accomplish that. In Pittsburgh, it was interesting on the master plan that we worked with there. This was the main reason that drove there. So this is a good example of thinking about, on the left-hand side of the screen here, there's all these entities that are affecting the trees and are working on the trees. And then if you look at the amount of money that they had at the time for planting and for maintenance, when you look at their peer groups, it really wasn't in alignment. So, it became pretty apparent to them on why they wanted a master plan, was because of all of these players touching the trees and all of these people affecting it, and not having everybody on the same page or coordinated vision, and complicated with the fact that there really wasn't enough funding to even accomplish any goals that they had. And so this is a perfect example of why a community might want to undertake the process of creating an urban forestry master plan. And you start thinking about, what are our desired outcomes? And this is that fun brainstorming idea, where you can sit back and think about, in a perfect world, what would we want our community to look like? And how do we want particularly our urban forest to look like? And start thinking about that. And, and as things happen, like climate change or social equity, or, development or storms, whatever is happening in your community, thinking about the impacts to it, and then what do you want desired outcomes of your forest? What is the legacy that you want to leave behind? And how do you want to try to impact that with the master plan process? So this is what Pittsburgh decided they really wanted to try to accomplish in their plan. This is a great step, and these are some awesome components. But thinking about the trees for the future, what do we want that to look like? How do we want that to look? And every community is going to have a different answer for this. And it's important to sit down at the beginning. Oftentimes we do this at the kickoff meeting after, we already know something's going to happen. People are engaged, people are excited, and you start beginning the planning process of scoping it out and working through the process. You don't want to do it too early, because you can go down a lot of rabbit holes and you can get steered in a lot of directions. But you want to do it at the critical juncture in the plan early enough where you can incorporate it and you can work towards those goals, and not too late where it's an afterthought. And when you're working through the management plan, the master plan, you'll quickly realize, and through that, is that the most important component of an urban forestry master plan is actually the process of doing it. Like I said, the difference between a management plan and a master plan is that it takes quite a bit longer, and it involves a lot more people. And having those frequent communications and conversations and goal setting meetings and discussions really helps to get a lot of people interested in the trees and get people understanding and buying in. I don't think anybody wants to do a master plan all by themselves and then try to present it to council and go, here's what we're going to do, adopt this. It really is all about the process, from collecting the data to involving stakeholders to developing recommendations and possible implementation strategies to monitoring and updating it. So, keep that in mind, that a lot of times when you're doing a master plan, the end product really isn't as important as the process of going through it. Not trying to discount the end product, but thinking that at the end of the day, having gone through a year-long planning process with several meetings and several review options and edit periods really helps to solidify that support that you want in your community and to get people really excited about it. And ultimately, it's going to help you to implement and be successful with your master plan. There's several options for the planning process. Some communities might want to create a steering committee or a tree champions or some sort of task force. A group of people that are knowledgeable and influential in the urban forest is a good idea. Thinking about existing plans out there, thinking about how do you want to try to engage the public? Do you want to try to engage the public? Thinking about how is the best way to display and communicate your master plan. Thinking about what other cities or what other neighboring communities or other sister cities are doing so that you can leverage that information and help to expand on that knowledge, that collective knowledge base is all critical to the planning process. A lot of times when you're working on an urban forestry master plan, it's not going to be just like it's going to involve a lot of different people. It's probably not going to just be one person building the plan or writing the plan. A lot of times you're going to have partners, and that's because there's some sub-specialty components. You might want to engage a marketing firm to help, or a graphic designer with some of the layout. You might want to have a local PR firm help with some engagement and some stakeholders. You might want to have some real advanced GIS analytics and have that expertise. You might want to have some good urban forestry and some risk assessment. You might have a legal component if you're looking at your ordinances and implications there. You might have a risk management if you're looking at trying to align somewhere around there, or some sustainability. So you can see that depending on how your plan is going to form and depending on what your goals and your initial desires and outcomes are, really starts to shape this team approach. It's important to have a lead. It's important to understand what everybody's roles and responsibilities are. This is the team that was created for the Pittsburgh Master Plan. It's just one example of a diverse set of teams that has really good skill sets in their specialty, and it facilitates what I believe is a great process. I mentioned the idea of a steering committee or tree champions or a task force. When you're assembling that, you don't want it to be too big. You don't want it to be too small. It is a good idea to have a diverse set. I mentioned, you probably want some local arborists. Maybe you want some people that have some money or some connections. Maybe you want some subcommittee members from planning and zoning or from sustainability. Maybe you want some people that have deep pockets, the ability to fundraise. Again, whatever your goals and needs are, thinking about that. This is a great way to get people engaged. Word of warning, when you have this idea of a steering committee or an advisory council, they're probably going to be involved more on the upfront and then more at the end. In the midst of the meat of the process, their role really isn't that critical until they're really more involved in the upfront with the planning, some of the goal setting, some of the initial brainstorming, and then you're really going to want this group at the end to help shepherd it and to get that support and to help get it implemented and rolling. In the middle process there where the analyzation is happening and some of the data gathering, review comments, their role is probably pretty minimal. So just something to kind of think about whenever you're putting together your team or you're thinking about who might be on your team. So finally in this section of why and how, this is the most common approach that happens for urban forestry master planning. It's pretty simple idea using the adaptive management approach from what do we have, what do we want, how do we get there, and then how are we doing? So it's that constant feedback. I mentioned earlier the difference between a master plan and a management plan is that You know, a master plan is something that you're going to revisit often. You're going to go back and check, and you're going to take advantage of opportunities and people and you know, things that come up. So that's where that "how are we doing" is it's a feedback loop. It's not something that you just set out a goal and do it. Some other approaches that have come along, you know, one of the things that's been exciting about this planning world that we're in now is that it's changing, and there's always new tools being developed. And one of the things that we helped work through is the sustainable urban forestry step-by-step approach. And you know, this is where we've moved our master planning to, is looking at really the three main categories of an urban forest, and thinking about the resources out there, the trees that are out there, thinking about the players, which would be the people impacting it and the people working on it, and then thinking about the management approach. You know, how are you working through it? What impacts are we making through it? So what we end up doing is using these three main categories and criteria, and just kind of working through and grading and working that way. I don't know how many people saw this come out in early August. It was got released around the ISA conference, but the Vibrant Cities Lab, if you Google that and check it out, it's an awesome new website that American Forests put out in partnership with the Forest Service and the National Regional Council of Governments. But basically, this is another tool out there in our toolbox now for creating urban forestry master plans. It's a website, and it has a lot of great information on case studies. And it does actually take that step-by-step guide approach and works it through. So it actually has all the steps built in here. So on the assess component, you know, it tells you where to start, and then prioritize, organize, plan, build, sustain. It really walks you through that whole process. And then the interesting and the really cool thing about it is that you can go back to the case studies and see, how does this affect, you know, human health? Or how does it affect stormwater or crime reduction? And there's really good, anywhere from 3 to 5 case studies examples for each component of the benefits of trees. So you can research, and you can go and say, all right, in Chicago, this is how they use technology. In Philadelphia, this is how they're able to show that stormwater and trees is important. And maybe you can take a little sliver of that and bring it into your plan, or, you know, use it as a reference. So the master planning process is changing, and it's growing. It, you know, it used to be more of like a state of the urban forest and looking at everything we have and coming up with some goals, to now it's really leveraging additional information and technology and promoting the idea of urban forests and the idea of the benefits of trees. So that's the why and the how. And let's go ahead and do another poll question here before we get started with the second set here. And then that'll give me a second to answer some more questions that are coming in. So I'm curious, as the components of a master plan, a lot of people get confused on the "what do we have" section there. So I'm just curious, how many people, you know, have a tree inventory, have a UTC, have existing management plans, you know, where you're at in there? All right, couple seconds more here. It looks like almost everybody has, well, quite a few people have some sort of combination of baseline data. All right, that's closed down. Jump back into the presentation. So the reason I ask that is to understand your urban forest. Some people, you know, want to obsess over what we have out there, but the master plan I just want to intersect here, can be a really good opportunity to maybe help you figure out what you have. And what I mean by that is you don't have to have a complete tree inventory or a complete urban tree canopy analysis to do a master plan. Sometimes communities or nonprofits will actually go through a master plan to help advocate for why they need to do a tree inventory or why they need to do an urban tree canopy analysis. So it can almost be like a fundraising arm or an advocacy tool. And you can point out that, you know, hey, I wish we knew what our tree inventory was, but we don't have one. Or I wish I knew what the people thought of trees, but we don't have one. So let's jump into the components of the master plan here then. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a series of, I just like jumping right into the components as far as case study stuff. So I'm going to use some examples here from Pittsburgh, from Cleveland, and Largo, and then a couple other ones. But, you know, fundamentally, an urban forestry master plan, the answer to the first approach is what do we have? And really what we're talking about then is existing information about the public trees and private trees within a defined area or region. When I talked about tree inventory, you know, everybody usually knows what that is, but that's looking at understanding the composition and the structure and function of your publicly managed trees. So usually that's your street trees. A lot of times that's your park trees. A lot of times that's all GPS or GIS really done. You understand the species composition, the size, the age, the condition, what type of maintenance is out there. And then urban tree canopy analysis. This is where we're talking about understanding not only what the bottom-up approach, like an inventory does, but this is more top-down. And we're looking at where is all of the tree canopy. Sometimes this is called a land cover analysis as well, where we're looking at top-down satellite imagery. Where are all the trees? Where is all of the impervious surface, all of our buildings and roads? Where is all of the pervious surfaces, like our ball fields, our trail systems? What is the water? And this is really critical because in most communities, anywhere from 80 to 85% of the urban forest is actually on private land. And if you're wanting to really make an impact from a master planning standpoint, it's critical to know what your entire urban forest is composed of. And whenever you get this information, you can really start to dissect it and understand it. And it's important to think about, you know, again, at the beginning, we talked about the process. Part of that process is thinking is how is your community run? Is it at a neighborhood level? Is it at a ward level? Is it at a specific geographic regions by, you know, community type? Or is it homeowner associations? Because that's how you're going to want to end up communicating your information out. If people have, you know, they think about what's in their backyard, how does it affect me immediately? How is this going to affect me? So if you can communicate it to them at their level that they're engaged at, that'll have a lot more meaning to them. And when you're talking about that, you can understand how you can relate the trees to them. So here we are with Pittsburgh, we can relate the neighborhoods and what percent canopy those neighborhoods have. And that's how they can see. It's like, oh, I live here and this is my percent canopy and that's good or that's bad. And then, you know, you can always add in all sorts of census information with poverty or, you know, home ownership. You can look at, you're starting to look at the health information as well. We can really start to dissect some of that. You can also look at other characteristics of the community. Here we are looking at urban heat island. This is becoming more and more popular in communities, the idea that, you know, we need not only from an environmental component and a comfort level, but also from a public health standpoint. You know, every year people unfortunately pass away because of extreme heat in urban areas. And we can look at that as it relates to the tree canopy as well. I know another interesting idea is to look at how your 311 or your internal calls are being coming in, and is it really related to the tree issue and the resource issue, or is it more related to people that know about it, understanding that? So here we can see at Largo that, there really is no correlation between the health and condition of the trees and where people call in from on complaints of tree-related issues. So this can be really important for if you're trying to advocate to going to more of a proactive maintenance versus a reactive maintenance. Part of reactive maintenance is reacting to phone calls and thinking that we have to have good customer service by responding within 30 days of complaints. That's not the most efficient, and it might not be the best situation to work towards. Here we are. Another example is thinking of what your issues are and ways that you might be able to use data. In Columbia, Missouri, we're looking at doing a leaf litter analysis to help them predict and manage the roadways during that critical season that's happening right now, and it's beating up their equipment. So we can look at the amount of tree canopy as it relates to the right-of-way. So we've been talking about everything from along the right-of-way to the backyards to shade. Slicing and dicing data can be critical to it. So whenever you have this, the what do we have, it's important to understand how are you performing in those issues. So it's not good enough to just say, all right, we have this data. This is what we have. Now let's make some goal setting with it. You need to evaluate how is that data and how is it. And this is where you come up with that sustainable urban forestry guide, and you start rating, doing a self-assessment, if you will, of how are we doing in these three main categories with all these subcategories to it. You don't have to do this. I think it's a good exercise. Maybe it makes the plan, maybe it doesn't. Again, the process component, but it really can help you to understand how what you have is how it's performing. Enough more examples of how you can use the data is understanding your stormwater component. Another idea to what you have is understanding you could do an iTree Eco or iTree Streets, and using the iTree suites to help you figure out what you have on that private land and seeing the total number of trees, the components of your trees, understanding the environmental functions of your trees, the value of your trees. So you could do this just on public, or you could do it on public and private. Extrapolating that value out, though, and understanding that is really a good way to communicate your functional benefits. So that's the component of, what do we have out there? And then this becomes that, what do we want there? So I'm curious, another poll question here to not break it up too much, but I'm really interested in understanding how many people think they have a good idea or good common goal alignment around the goals of your urban forest. Do you feel like your homeowners, your department heads, your allied departments have good alignment around where your urban forest is headed currently and where you want it to go? All right, I'm going to close that out. And it looks like about half the people say no, which isn't surprising. About a quarter say yes, and the other quarter say, of course, it's more complicated than that. So that's good feedback, because I think as foresters and urban foresters, we often dwell on what do we have, what are our resources. Most of us went into urban forestry because we like trees and not necessarily people. But in order to be successful as urban foresters, we need to know what do people want. In the adaptive management approach, it's what do we have, what do we want, how do we get there? So what do we want? And the easiest and best way to do that is, again, that steering committee, doing some stakeholder or interdepartmental interviews and questions and answering period. Public meetings are a great way. Maybe it's an online survey. And maybe with some of these things, maybe it never makes it into the plan. Maybe it's just a process you're going through to make people feel like they have buy-in, to show respect and show support. But you can also have some real enlightenment come out of these. The people that are looking at your trees every day and are interacting with them, and they don't even think about it as an urban forest. They're just thinking about it as that tree out at that park that they love to sit at, or they think about their walk with their dog and how that they love the shady part, can become really critical and real important to helping you understand how you can help them better and to make better goal setting. And really, it can become more advocacy. I mean, this is what your council and your elected officials are going to care most about is, what does the public want? I hear what you want. You want to do this. You want to buy a bucket truck, or you want to hire more staff. But what do the people want? We've done some interesting surveys on how much would they support increased taxes or fees or special assessments, and a lot of people support that idea. If they know where the money is going and they know why they need it, it can help with that. Understanding what do they even know about your urban forest and your trees is an important part. Do they know that trees help to shade? Do they know that they help clean the air? Or do they just hate leaves because they have to rake them? Do that, and kind of that self-assessment part too is, how do they think you're doing? So when you have that buy-in and you have that stakeholder feedback, it can really help you drive this idea of how do we get there? How do we set these goals? Now that we know what we have and we know where we want to go, how are we going to get there? And, I think the most important part is just setting this vision statement. What mission, vision statement, strategic plan, whatever you want to call it, is the idea of, what do we want? Now that we have all this feedback, where do we want to go? And then it comes through setting up some clear strategies and some clear goals. And these look different for everybody. And it's important that they do look different. It's a custom process. Everybody's strategies are going to be different. Everybody's goals are going to be different. And that's great. That's what it should be. Every community is different. We can have some common themes around setting canopy goals or increasing awareness of it, or, decreasing risk or species diversity, whatever it might be. But you really should have some unique goals and some settings for it. And you can make some impressive calculations and improvements to your plan. Sometimes it could be just through, here's an example of how just realigning budgets or increasing a little bit of budgets can help get there. So this is one of the strategies is, evaluating your budget. You can see in this situation where this is what the urban forest is going to look like with some modifications to the budget. Sometimes it can be pretty simple to just setting some prioritized goals and working towards those as well. It doesn't have to be 50 strategies, it could just be, let's just set a couple goals and work from here. In Cleveland, their major goal is to try to get trees as critical community infrastructure. It's more advocacy than any kind of management or anything like that. And they ended up, okay, if we're going to accomplish these 3 goals, let's develop some action steps. And, so here we are, we have an action sheet, and it's a step-by-step process. And it talks about, working the plan. One of my favorite sayings is, fail to plan, plan to fail, right? So here we are, we're working through our action steps and our action sheets and of what we're going to accomplish. And the suggested participants, that's just as critical. And the idea of, who's going to take ownership of this and who's going to have some accountability behind it. And then finally, how are we doing? This kind of brings it all together. So we understand what we have. We know where we want to go. Now we have some strategies for implementation. Now how are we doing? How are we going to actually implement? And then where does that going to say? I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that it's a feedback loop, and the master plan it's going to ebb and it's going to flow as you begin to implement it, because you're going to have funding available at certain times. You're going to have interest wax and wane depending on the cycle of people. You're going to have storms, and you're going to have things happen to your forest. And that's when it's critical to have this shared vision and this shared common goal. And then take advantage of it and check back in and see, how are we doing on this? This was our goal, to increase canopy or to increase awareness. Do we need to do another survey? Do we need to do another tree canopy analysis? Do we need to do an analysis of our funding? So, the key to a good implementation strategy and feedback loop is the rollout. Master plans should be a lot different than management plans. You should have a press releases. You should have, make a hoopla about it. Do some tree planting. Do some council presentations. Make sure your allied nonprofits are out there with you. Help spreading that good word. One of the things I like most is in Charlotte, they decided to take the approach of creating a website so that people could go to it. We don't want these plans to just be sitting on a desk or sitting on a shelf somewhere. We want them engaged. We want people are using them and seeing them. We want them incorporated in other plans. One approach is trying to get the plans into, referenced in sustainability plans or inside of green infrastructure or inside of the city comp plan. You want to try to network and to get these references, cross-references going so that, people are asking you for, hey, I noticed in our comp plan a tree canopy goal. How are we doing? Is there some way I can help with that? Is there something that I'm doing in my job that is impacting that? So communicating that is great. Helping the general public know how they can get involved. When you first roll out a master plan, you're going to have a lot of interest at first, and there's going to be a lot of desire to go out and do something. So be prepared to direct that energy and to harness that momentum. That's what you're going to want. That's the most exciting component of it. And again, keeping in mind that people want to be involved at the local level. They want to be involved in what affects them. That corporation wants to help with the park that goes next to their building. That homeowner wants to be involved in their neighborhood school. Keeping that level. They're probably not going to want to, help you fundraise to hire new staff. So directing that energy, keeping it engaged throughout the process. This is a good feedback mechanism, is thinking about, setting up your strategies, setting up your goals, your strategic plan, setting some time frames on when you hope to accomplish them, and, checking boxes, reassessing where you're at, reprioritizing goals. Through the implementation component of a master plan, it's kind of interesting. Some are pretty checkbox, it's like hire staff. Okay, check, did that, Some can be a little bit more nebulous, or it could be a little bit longer approach, that might be a harder. So one important component is to think of those key metrics that are going to judge your success so that you can report those back. Maybe it's number of trees planted, but also maybe it's the perception of trees and looking at measuring the feedback loop there. And, kind of finally on the implementation strategy here, I do think it's really important to think about your educational campaign and think about, what do you want that to look like? How do you want to frame that so that it can help with fundraising, it can help with public support. Do you need to do like an annual State of the Urban Forest report? Do you need to do frequent meetings? Do you need to have some kind of celebration every year? Around an Arbor Day or something, or a roast the mayor for trees, or some sort of way that you can keep it going and you can carry the momentum beyond just the excitement of a master plan. How can you keep people engaged and consistent? And that's the beauty of an educational campaign or some sort of branded, themed component, is it's a way to kind of carry that message on than just that initial excitement. And one of the more exciting ones out there that I've seen is like the Kentucky Roots campaign that's happening, or Be a Smart Ash in Denver, Boulder area. There's all sorts of good examples, whether it's the city of Arborly Love in Philly. Lots of good examples of people using those educational campaigns to further engage and get people involved. So with that, that's pretty much my ideas on urban forestry master plans. Here is the CEU code. Sorry about that. Again, the master plan process really is about the process. Like I said, it's different than a management plan. It's more long-range forecasting for shared common goals. And it's about what do we have, what do we want, how are we going to get there, and then how are we doing. So I will email everybody out here in a little bit the link to, once I get the PowerPoint uploaded to SlideShare, I'll email that out. Feel free. I have been recording this, so I'll put out a link to our website there as well. So if you want to share it with anybody else to sit through and listen to me, that's good. I appreciate that. And if you have any questions or any feedback, feel free to shoot me an email or follow me on Twitter or send me a text message or a phone call. I'll be at the Partners in Community Forestry Conference. There's a whole great urban forestry master planning lightning round happening there. I'll be given a 7-minute version of this presentation, as well as followed by great examples from across the country of other master plans. So if you want more information, check it out there. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your week. So thank you very much.